The final double day in Spililmbergo Open is officially over because Levy concluded his round 6 game versus yet another probably underrated Indian young player, Nick Hill, who is just shy of 2200 elo, having gained quite a lot of rating points recently. We didn't really have a lot of information to prep before the round. We were not sure if Nikhil was going to play e4 or d4, but we noticed that probably it's a good idea to play a closed position where Nikhil was not really playing as confident chess compared to open positions. So d4 happened. d4, d5, knight f3 here was played by the Indian player, followed by knight f6 and g3. I actually treat this as an accuracy because normally white has to play c4, knight c3, not to allow black to have a complete freedom. And after g3 here, Levy played bishop g4 after something like a couple of minutes of thought. I'm not sure I like this move, to be honest. I think that bishop f5 is a bit more accurate because then you want to play e6, c6, and h6. But as later it was confirmed by friend of Levy's, Alex, joined the chat and explained that actually bishop g4 was the move that Levy prepped for one of the New York tournaments. Actually, I didn't know that because in one of the previous discussions against another opponent from New York, I had suggested Levy to play bishop f5. Either way, the move is just fine. Bishop gt e6. The main difference maybe with the bishop f5 here is that you have to understand that Black wants to play e6 and h6 and make sure there's no knight h4. So white's c4 now is a bit slow. So after bishop g4, maybe white can still pick up the idea to play h3, g4 and try to trap the bishop. Either way, Nikhil decided not to do it. He played show castle, bishop e7, c4, c6. Queen b3 is not a problem. The Lasco bishop is out from the c8 square. Black is completely fine. Knight e2, and now I like this move h6 because Levy correctly picked up that white wants to play h3, knight h4, and trade off the bishop, and the knight on d2 actually is protected the pawn on c4 because, for example, had Nikhil played h3, he needs to understand what is this position, and it's not so clear to how exactly he is planning to regain the pawn. So what happened is that h6 was played, rook e1, threatened to play e4, Levy played bishop f5. All of this was really nice. Show castle, a5, provoking some weaknesses here. Nikhil played a3, knight e7, and knight e5. So the position was pretty level, and here Levy decided to force matters, knight x on e5, which is probably okay. Maybe there were some other moves like queen c7, keep more tension on the board, or even some bishop h7 idea. I'm not sure I support this choice by an engine. But alright, this is still okay move, d takes on e5. I thought that knight e4 is going to happen, stopping white c4. Levy played knight e7, it still is completely normal. And here, the Indian player made a mistake. He should have played c takes on d5. Now, with the idea that after c takes on d5, most likely white plays e takes on d5 to combat the bishop. White will play e4, d takes on knight e4, threatening to play knight e6. But here's knight c5. With the idea that knight e6 is not a big deal, you can just take it, play knight e3, and actually just collect the pawn on d6, and this is a fork. So what happened here is that Nikhil made it even in the worst version. He played e4 immediately. Now the point is after d takes, here he probably realized that after knight e4, his idea to get the knight on d6 quite doesn't work. Why? Because here Levy can play knight c5. Same idea again. Knight e6, takes, and knight e3. But on top of that, as you can see, with these two pawns present on the board, white is never threatened to take the pawn on b7. So here he decided to limit the damage and play bishop e4. Levy quickly played knight c5, bishop f5, e takes d5, and bishop c3. Now, this is the moment when things were looking really great for Levy because he had 20-minute advantage on the clock, clearly better position, but attempting immediately knight e3 move was quite not working. For example, rook e2, bishop c5, white actually has a surprising move, knight f3, and after rook d2, this knight on d3 is trapped. So what Levy could have done is keep the knight on c5 and play queen d7, improve the position, play rook d8, and then keep pressing the pawn on b3, and maybe play knight e3 at some point later. It was a great move. Unfortunately, Levy missed it, He played knight e6, which was not a good move because knight really stands well on c5. There's no need to push it to e6. So here white played queen c2, g6. By the way, the queen c2 hits the pawn on f5. g6, knight f3, queen b6. Levy was thinking about his own ideas and he started to miss opponent's moves. Bishop d2 hits the pawn, king g7, bishop e3. So clearly here during the live broadcast, since I was doing live coverage on Levy's YouTube and Twitch channels, you could see that Levy was very unhappy. He spent here a lot of time and ultimately he played this very strange move, queen a6. After 40 minutes of thought, it was a bad choice. He had to play bishop c5, acknowledge that part of the advantage is gone. So the point is, if white takes it here and plays something like queen c5, Levy can still press and play ideas like b5, b4, creating weaknesses at the queen side against slightly better knight than white, but ultimately it's not enough to claim any real advantage. What happened here is that Levy played queen a6, a move I have very difficult time to explain because the queen on a6 is simply disconnected. Now white could have played knight e4 for most of the part. He decided not to do it. Levy had a chance to play rook d8, stopping knight e4. He fixed all of those pawns on the dark squares, which was still okay move. c5 here. Indian player attempted to shut the queen away from the game. I'm playing c5, rook d8, rook d1, and here Levy correctly picked up that white wants to play rook d6, sacrifice an exchange. For example, if he had played something like, I'm not sure, let's say queen a7, rook d6 looks really strong. Takes, queen c3, queen f6, knight g5, the queen on h7, everything is just disconnected, and white has a free reign at the king side. So Levy correctly picked it up. He played rook d5, takes, rook d1, rook d8, king g2. Yeah, for reasons unknown here, the Indian player was rejecting knight e4 move for the entirety of the game. I don't really know what was the reason. King g2 was played, and apparently here king f8 was still good, but it was pretty difficult to understand if bishop c5 was working. Rook c8, rook d5, b6 with a level position. But again, I'm not entirely sure if black really needs it. So here Levy played king f8 with the idea to improve the king. And after queen c3, I don't know what happened here. Why Levy suddenly changed his mind and not play king e8, because I thought he wants to bring the king closer and then try to bother the pawn. Something like queen c6 or queen b5. Maybe it's worth mentioning you could have played queen c6 immediately, hit the pawn and play d4 because white will play knight e4. You could have taken c5, the queen is lost. But this idea could be improved. For example, you play king e8 and let's say white does something like rook d2. Maybe now queen c6 works with the same idea because knight e4, queen c5, there's no check. So that is a quite hard to explain moment. I can only assume that Levy was quite unhappy with the position, so he played e4. Very dangerous move, but actually the refutation was really cool. After knight e4, knight c5 here, during the broadcast I spotted that white has the tactical resource of e6 to put a queen on h8. So the idea here after e6, if black plays knight e6, this obviously loses, takes, and I did not see actually there's a mate on the board. I saw that queen h8, king f7, white collects an extra piece. But yeah, I mean, bishop h6, queen g7 would have been simply made on the board immediately. Also, if black will play f takes on e6, the spectacular shot is knight takes on f5. The idea that if you take on d1, queen g7, queen e7 is just a mate on the board. Very cool shot. And again, e takes or g takes. There's always the same idea. Let me again put it to you. For example, here, you take it, same idea with a mate, queen 8, bishop h6, check, and mate on the board. Or also check, collect the rook and just do great. So what happened here is that after e6, apparently Levy, I think he was calculating f6 and then collect the pawn. But here, apparently white had a very nice study-like victory to play b4, takes, knight e6, and now the invisible move, queen b3. Attack the knight, and after take it, now play bishop h6. Now the key idea is that after queen g8, king d7, rook d4, black's position simply falls apart. For example, you go here and queen check, everything falls apart. The king is weak pawns, so it's just strategically losing. So actually this was a miss from both players. Here, Levy played queen b6, which was an okay move. Maybe he could have played bishop g5, I'm not entirely sure. With similar idea to meet queen c5, bishop e7, knight e6 check. queen e6, rook d8, it seems that white wins an exchange. However, there's still king g7. So white can continue rook d6, takes, and I'm not sure if this position is possible to win. White is slightly better because of the passed pawn. For example, something like king h, so queen d3. It feels like it should be a draw, but white is still pressing here in a slightly better endgame, probably just a draw. So what happened here is that Levy played queen b6, and now Nikhil played e6 with the idea to meet f6. There's no more tricks. He played bishop h6, king e8, king g8 probably are equal moves, bishop e3, and apparently here white was still pressing and Levy was under serious pressure and he made a very terrible mistake. He played queen d6. I think this was based on miscalculation. We have to talk about this in our training sessions, how not to do these things. Probably king f8 was the human response. Again, threatening to take on e6, and it's not so clear how white is planning to make progress because let's say b4 quite doesn't work. Takes, there's knight e6, knight f5, hit a queen, and there's the key move, queen c6. Queen c6, everything is alright because the king on f8 protects the knight on e7, there's no forks. Check, doesn't give anything, just play king f7. So this was missed. Levy unfortunately played queen d6, which is a very difficult move to explain. I can only imagine he missed, not knight f5, he thought that queen c6 is going to be a move and this is simply impossible. I think he miscalculated that after king h2, g takes on f5, rook d8, bishop d8, the knight on c5 remains under attack. However, again, Levy had a chance because suddenly the Indian player made a mistake by playing queen c5. Had he played bishop c5, queen e6, and queen f3, collecting the pawn here on b7 or h5, things would have been really bad for Levy. Maybe also the idea here that after b6, bishop e3, there's no way to protect the pawn. The king is too far away, it can't jump two squares. Queen f7 drops the pawn on f5. Queen b3 just leaves the king wide open. So that's why here queen c5 was a mistake. And now the position normalized. Queen b5, b6, queen e3, bishop c7, queen d1, king g6. And I had a feeling the game's getting to a draw, and it was not very far. Levy had 7 minutes versus white's 4. White was still pressing here, bishop d8. And after queen c4, this is where Levy started to get really nervous. And apparently here he had a very cute way to secure a draw. Not obvious if you ask me. The idea was queen c4, take it. And now the key idea. White wants to play king h3, f3, g4, create the outside pass pawn at the king side. These pawns are targets. And that's why it's a very instructive way to make a draw. It is bishop c7. With the idea to meet king h3 or even f3 with f4. Sacrifice the pawn with the idea, for example, a g takes on f4. You can just play f5, or even a king f5 is also good. Put a king on e6 over here on c6, bishop c5. Just build a fortress and claim a draw. Unfortunately, he missed it. And he played king f7, the game continued, king h3, king e7, bishop f4, queen e1, here queen e4. And now the Indian player suddenly made a mistake, king h2, he was still pressing. He gave Levy an opportunity to come back in the game, f3 was his choice. Now this was based on the idea that f5 is impossible. Takes, bishop g5. Now after this trade, black is losing because he's not in time to defend the pawn on e4. So you cannot do that. But here's the critical moment of the entire game. Takes. Again, Levy is not in time to play f5, stopping g4 because of bishop g5, bishop d8, king f4, king f5. So he played king e6, g4, takes, f5, king g3. The only way for Levy to save the game. He had 4 minutes on the clock. And during the broadcast, I just said, either you see it or you don't. So dear viewers, if you want to find out, you can pause the video yourself, black to play and find a draw. Otherwise, white is winning this. You can pause the video. Now, did you find it? Levy unfortunately spent all time and he didn't find it. He played bishop e7. The key idea was give up the bishop. Now, where's the idea? Apparently, it's not going after these pawns. The idea here is to play king c6 and b5. So not only suddenly you see this is the wrong corner for the bishop. You just put the king on a8 and that's a theoretical draw. If white decides here to play 8x on b5 and play something like bishop d2, stopping the black king passing through, you play a4, want to trade the final pawn, b4, a3, here, a2, here, promote, here, and this is just a draw. It's I'm not sure how easy it is to spot, especially when you feel you are in trouble when the time scramble is approaching. Levy after the game said it's findable. He was very upset that he did not find it. It is what it is. He played bishop e7. And actually it was a bit tragic because white could have played h5 immediately and he gave Levy another chance to pick up the same idea, albeit this time it was much more difficult to find. f4 was the right idea again. Bishop f4, bishop h4, and king d5, same idea, and get to the corner. Or king f4, bishop takes on h4, bishop b6, bishop b1, again, should be a draw, although of course black still has to work. So there was nothing up to that Levy could have done. He can never trade the bishops because of the concept of the outside pass pawn. White uses the h pawn to use it as a bait. For example, you trade these pawns, and the white king is simply faster, pick up those pawns, and there was nothing Levy could have done. So the white king simply marches towards the queen side, now uses the pawn as a bait, h6. Okay, maybe around here, Levy could have kept the bishop here, doesn't change anything. White is gonna win this. For example, you go here, 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 the king goes back here, collect those pawns, and that's it. It's game over. That's why this concept of using the h-pawn as a bait is so important. So what happened is that ultimately Levy tried some chances, and maybe here the final moment he could have done is going for this position, bishop a5 here, try to put the king in the corner and really hope that white is going to mess up and play b4. For example, here you're hoping for this kind of position, takes, king goes here in the corner, and it is just a theoretical draw. Of course, white would never miss it, but I think it was worth a shot. But Levy decided to put the king here. Now it doesn't matter. Even if you give up the bishop for the b pawn, this king is never making the corner, and Levy resigned. It is what it is. It's a painful loss. But so far, the Spililmbergo Open has been rather unsuccessful for Levy. He is getting a lot of underrated opponents. Two youngsters from India, other young players like in the previous round, the young player from Italy, couple of strong women players. So it is what it is, but the important lessons have been learned, and Levy is ultimately becoming the better player. This is the road to the Grandmaster road. Some of the sometimes there will be bumps on the road. Levy is perfectly ready for this. Everything is good. And once again, thank you for everybody who was watching it live. So 3 more games to be played in Spililmbergo. The action comes back tomorrow on Tuesday at 3:15 Central European Summer Time. I'll be host on Levy's YouTube and Twitch channels. Hope you like it. Press the like and come back tomorrow.